The star cruiser Vigilant hung silently against the backdrop of Neptune's blue depths, its silver hull reflecting the distant sunlight. Commander Han stood at the viewport, shoulders squared, watching as the massive Imperial vessel emerged from faster-than-light travel. The ship dwarfed the Vigilant by at least 20 times, its crystalline spires and imposing weapon arrays making Han's vessel look like a child's toy in comparison. "They're hailing us," said Officer Tay, her fingers dancing over the holographic interface. "Standard Imperial diplomatic protocols," Han nodded. On screen, the bridge darkened as the projection formed. A tall figure materialized, Ambassador Kang of the Galactic Empire. His skin had the metallic sheen common to the ruling species of the Empire, with ridges that ran from his temples to his jaw. He wore elaborate ceremonial armor that seemed designed more to intimidate than for practical defense. "This is Ambassador Kang of the 7th Imperial Fleet. You are in violation of Empire-controlled space. Identify yourselves," Han stepped forward. "This is Commander Han of the Earth Defense Fleet. You are approaching Earth-controlled space. Our boundaries are clearly marked on all galactic charts. Turn back now." Kang's expression shifted to something between amusement and contempt. "Earth-controlled space? Your species has barely managed to place a few primitive habitats on your moon and a scientific outpost on Mars. Under Imperial law, a species must have colonized at least 3 planetary bodies to claim a star system. Our laws differ from yours," Han replied evenly. "This entire system is under Earth protection. We've made this clear to Imperial scouts before." The ambassador's laugh echoed through the bridge. "Yes, we received your quaint messages. The Empire has cataloged over 8,000 species across the galaxy. Most understand their place once they see the breadth of our civilization." He leaned closer to the projection. "Your solar system contains resources valuable to the Empire. We are prepared to be generous. You may keep your homeworld and limited orbital rights. The rest belongs to the Empire now." Han didn't blink. "Earth is off limits. This system is off limits. You misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation." "Kang," said, his voice hardening, "this is a courtesy notification. Imperial mining operations will begin in your asteroid belt within the standard quarter cycle. Any interference will be considered an act of aggression against the Empire." "And you misunderstand our message," Han replied. "This isn't a request. Earth is off limits." The bridge crew remained perfectly still, watching the exchange. They all knew what was at stake. Kang's eyes narrowed. "Your primitive ships couldn't stand against a single Imperial cruiser, let alone the might of our fleet. What exactly do you think you can do to stop us?" Han allowed himself a small smile. "That's not your concern. Leave our system, and you'll never have to find out." Bold words for a species that hasn't even mastered gravity manipulation, Kang scoffed. He turned slightly, speaking to someone off-screen. "Deploy the survey drones. Standard procedure for pre-spacefaring acquisitions." "Ambassador," Han said, voice dropping dangerously low, "remove your drones immediately or face consequences." The Imperial's face showed genuine amusement now. "Consequences? Your species still uses combustion propulsion. Your vessels can barely reach your system's edge without taking years." "What possible?" Han cut the transmission with a gesture. "Sir?" Officer Tay questioned, her hand hovering over the controls. "They're deploying automated survey units, at least 50 of them." "Let them," Han said quietly. "The boundary buoys will handle it." The crew watched on the main display as tiny objects detached from the Imperial ship, spreading out like seeds in the wind. As the first drone crossed the invisible line Earth had established, a soft pulse of blue energy rippled through space. The drone simply stopped, then another, and another. "They're trying to re-establish communication," Tay reported. "Ignore them," Han ordered. "Prepare to return to Earth." On the screen, the massive Imperial ship turned, retrieving its frozen drones before accelerating away. It wasn't retreat. Han knew better than to think that. It was regrouping. Later, in his quarters, Han reviewed the recording of the encounter, while drafting his report to Earth Command. The Empire had finally arrived in force just as the predictions had warned. A simple survey mission now, but the mining fleets would follow. Then the colonists. Then the full might of the Imperial military. They thought Earth was defenseless, primitive, easy prey. The same mistake countless civilizations had made throughout history when encountering a seemingly less advanced culture. Han smiled grimly as he transmitted his report. Earth had chosen to appear primitive, choosing careful isolation after the global wars of the previous century. While the Empire expanded outward, consuming resources and subjugating worlds, humanity had turned inward, developing technologies that worked with nature rather than against it. The Empire would return, of course, and when they did, they would learn exactly why Earth had warned them to stay away. 6 months passed in uneasy quiet. Then the deep space sensors lit up like festival lights. "They're coming back," Officer Tay said, her voice steady despite the tension that filled the monitoring station. "A lot more of them this time." Defense Director Kim leaned over the glowing display table, studying the approaching ships. His weathered face, marked by decades of service, betrayed no emotion. "Count 23. Vessels. Heavy mining equipment, resource processors, 3 military escorts." Tay enlarged the image. "Standard Imperial mining operation." Kim nodded slowly. This was exactly what they had prepared for over decades. "Time to breach?" "At current speed, they'll reach the Mars orbital line in 6 hours. The director tapped his communication band. "Alert Status 1. Notify Commander Han and the Defense Council." Inside the hidden command center beneath the Himalayas, Kim watched as the room filled with Earth's defense leadership. They took their places around the circular table, faces illuminated by the holographic display showing the approaching Imperial fleet. "They really didn't listen," said General Zhou, head of the Asian Defense Coalition. "Just as the simulations predicted. The Empire hasn't faced meaningful resistance in over 4 centuries, Commander Han said, entering the room. "They've forgotten what it means to fight someone who can actually hurt them." The room fell silent as President Yoon entered. Despite her small stature, she commanded the space with quiet authority. "What are our options?" Director Kim stepped forward. "The fleet is led by Admiral Park of the Empire's Resource Acquisition Division. Not their top military commander, but experienced. They're approaching with mining equipment, clearly intending to begin operations in our asteroid belt." "Have they responded to communications?" the President asked. "They've ignored 3 warnings already," Han replied. "Standard Imperial procedure when dealing with what they consider primitive worlds." President Yoon's eyes hardened. "Recommendations? Activate the grid," Han said without hesitation. "Show them enough to make them reconsider, but not everything. Not yet." The President looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. "The moment we reveal any of our true capabilities, everything changes. There's no going back to hiding." "With ye respect, Madam President," said Kim. "They've already decided we're worth invading. Hiding is no longer an option." She nodded once. "Activate defensive measures. Minimal force. I want their ships disabled, not destroyed. No casualties if possible." The YAI command center hummed with activity as orders went out. Around Earth and throughout the solar system, dormant systems began to wake. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the Imperial mining vessel Harvester, watching the blue-green planet on the main screen with mild interest. "Another warning message. From the humans, Admiral," his communications officer reported. "Ignore it," Park said dismissively. "The same as the last 3. Threats with no substance." His second-in-command approached, offering a data tablet. "Sir, intelligence reports indicate their technology level is pre-warp. Combustion engines, early ion propulsion, primitive fission power. Their orbital defenses consist mainly of outdated satellites and a handful of small space stations." The Admiral barely glanced at the report. "Standard procedure, then. Deploy the mining drones to the asteroid belt. If they interfere, the escorts can handle any resistance." "And the population?" "Once they see our power, they'll accept Imperial authority like all the others." Park turned away from the screen. "Begin operations." The Imperial fleet crossed the Mars orbital line with impunity. Mining vessels spread out, heading toward the resource-rich asteroid belt while military escorts maintained formation. In the Ein Command Center, President Yoon gave a single nod to Director Kim. Now! Kim pressed his palm to the authorization panel. Activation codes confirmed. Grid power at 30%. Throughout the solar system, what had appeared to be ordinary space debris, old satellites, and abandoned research probes suddenly came to life. Nanoscale machines hidden in the dust of the asteroid belt awakened. Defensive platforms disguised as communication relays powered up. On the Harvester's bridge, alarms suddenly blared. Admiral, energy signatures appearing throughout the system. The sensor officer's voice cracked with surprise. They're everywhere. Impossible, Park snapped. Their technology can't. The ship shuddered violently, knocking several crew members to the floor. Report, Park demanded. Power systems failing. Engines offline. Weapons non-responsive. His officers called out rapidly deteriorating status reports as screens flickered around them. The escorts? Same condition, sir. All fleet vessels are reporting complete system failures. The main screen activated without command, showing a human face. Commander Han. Admiral Park, Han said calmly. Your vessels have been disabled but not harmed. Your life support and basic functions remain operational. We warned you that Earth is off limits. Park's face flushed with rage. How dare you? This is an act of war against the Empire. Our main fleet will. Your ships are now under our control. Han continued as if Park hadn't spoken. We'll be boarding to escort your crews to temporary habitation facilities. You'll be treated well and eventually returned to Imperial space. This is impossible, Park whispered, looking around at his dead ship. Your technology. You can't have this level of advancement. Our intelligence reports were incomplete. Han finished. A deliberate choice on our part. Your empire judges civilizations by how far they expand, how many worlds they claim. Humanity chose a different path after nearly destroying ourselves centuries ago. We turned our technological development inward rather than outward. Outside, the viewport. Park watched in shock as small Earth vessels approached his mighty fleet, now nothing more than drifting metal. He had commanded Imperial forces for 30 years, subjugated a dozen worlds, and never once faced defeat. This is just one mining fleet, he warned. When the Emperor learns what happened here, he'll send more ships, Han agreed. And learn the same lesson you're learning now. Earth is off limits. As the boarding parties approached, Admiral Park stared at the distant blue planet. The supposedly primitive, weak, defenseless world that had just humbled the mighty Imperial fleet without firing a single destructive shot. For the first time in his long career, he felt something unfamiliar. Fear of what might happen when the Empire pushed harder against an enemy they clearly did not understand. The Imperial Palace on Centauri Prime gleamed like a massive diamond under the light of 3 suns. Inside, the war chamber. Emperor Gil slammed his fist against the holographic display, causing the image of Admiral Park's defeated fleet to scatter like dust. Impossible, he roared. The assembled military leadership remained silent, no one daring to speak. How could primitive dirt dwellers disable an entire fleet? High General Su, the Emperor's most trusted military advisor, finally spoke. The humans appear to have concealed their true technological capabilities, Your Majesty. For what purpose? The Emperor's voice was dangerously quiet now. What species advances in secret? An older man stepped forward from the shadows. Director, June of Imperial Intelligence, his simple gray uniform standing out among the ornate military dress of the others. One with something to fear, perhaps, or something to protect. The Emperor gestured impatiently. Explain. I've had my analysts searching the deepest archives, June said, activating his own datapad. Earth was actually visited 300 years ago. The scout ship cataloged them as potentially dangerous. Extended observation required. And, the Emperor prompted. The report was filed, flagged for follow-up, and then... June looked uncomfortable. lost in administrative processing. It appears multiple departments claimed the remote system wasn't worth the resources to monitor. The original scout died in the border wars, and the report was buried. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. What made this scout classify them as dangerous, when they hadn't even reached their own moon yet? Director June projected a centuries-old image. They had nearly destroyed themselves in global warfare, but in the aftermath, their scientists made several theoretical breakthroughs our analysts couldn't fully understand. The scout noted that they seemed to be developing along technological paths very different from our own or any other known species. Different? How? Asked High General Sue. While most civilizations, including ours, developed energy-based technologies, fusion, antimatter, zero-point energy, Earth scientists were exploring consciousness technology interfaces and quantum entanglement on scales we've never achieved. June closed the historical file. The scout recommended careful observation because they showed signs of developing what he called orthogonal technology, advancement along completely different axes than the standard progression. The Emperor turned to a nervous-looking scientist. What have we learned from the captured ships? Chief Scientist Min bowed slightly. Very little, Your Majesty. The Earth defense systems didn't just disable our ships, they completely isolated all networks and sealed the technology behind quantum locks we cannot breach. And the prisoners? The Emperor asked. Admiral Park and his officers report being treated well, General Sue said. They're being held in comfortable facilities on their moon. The humans have made it clear they will be returned once diplomatic. Channels are established. The Emperor stared out at the stars. Assemble the Grand Fleet, all available ships. I want Earth surrounded within 30 days. Your Majesty, Director June said carefully, perhaps negotiation would be. They humiliated the Empire. The Emperor cut him off. No world defies us, not even one with unusual technology. On Earth, the Global Defense Council convened in the circular chamber beneath Mount Fuji. The mood was solemn as reports came in from observation posts throughout the system. Imperial communication traffic has increased 5,000%, reported Intelligence Chief 1. Their entire military appears to be mobilizing. Commander Han nodded grimly. As expected, the Empire hasn't faced defeat in generations. They won't simply accept what happened. The captured admiral? Asked President Yoon. Still in the lunar facility, Director Kim answered. He's been cooperative but continues to warn that the Empire will respond with overwhelming force. The chamber fell silent as Dr. Lee entered. The small, unassuming woman was the primary architect of Earth's invisible defense network and rarely attended council meetings, preferring her lab deep under the Pacific. The Empire's response fleet will be larger than our simulations predicted, she said without preamble, projecting her data onto the main screen. At least 30,000 ships, based on our deep space observations. Murmurs spread through the council. Even with their advanced technology, such numbers were concerning. Can our defensive grid handle a force that size? President Yoon asked directly. Dr. Lee nodded. Yes, but not without revealing much more of our capabilities than we've shown so far. And there will almost certainly be casualties this time. Which brings us to the central question, Commander Han said. Do we continue hiding what humanity has become? Or is it time to step into the galactic community as we truly are? President Yoon looked around the table. Opinions? We've hidden long enough, said General Zhou firmly. The Empire now knows we exist and have technology worth fighting for. If we don't stand firmly now, they'll never stop coming. But exposure means everything changes, countered Minister Dahl of the Resource Division. Once the galaxy knows what we can do, every power will either want to ally with us or destroy us. Our period of peaceful development ends forever. Dr. Lee cleared her throat softly. There's another consideration. The Empire controls over 600 inhabited worlds, most of them subjugated through force. If we demonstrate there's another path to advancement besides their endless conquest, it could spark change throughout the galaxy, or make us the biggest target in known space, Minister Dahl retorted. President Yoon studied the projected images of the gathering Imperial fleet. We chose isolation after nearly destroying ourselves in the last World War. We turned inward to heal our planet and ourselves. We developed technology that works in harmony with natural systems rather than dominating them. She stood slowly. Perhaps it's time to share what we've learned. And if the Empire doesn't want to learn? Commander, Han asked quietly. The President's face hardened. Then we show them exactly why Earth is off limits. In the Imperial science vessel orbiting just outside Earth's solar system, scientist Min carefully examined the salvaged components recovered from space after the fleet's defeat. Most were useless, burned out from whatever energy the humans had used. But one tiny device no larger than his fingernail still pulsed with strange energy. Incredible, he whispered to himself. They've somehow embedded quantum entanglement pairs within organic neural matrices. He didn't understand exactly what that meant, but he knew it represented technology beyond anything the Empire possessed. For the first time in his long career studying alien technologies, Min felt a chill of genuine fear. The Empire wasn't just facing an enemy with superior weapons. They were facing a different kind of advancement entirely, one their scientists didn't even have the framework to understand. As the massive Imperial armada assembled at the edge of Imperial space, both sides prepared for a confrontation that would change the galaxy forever. The stars disappeared one by one as the Imperial armada dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Ships materialized by the thousands, their hulls gleaming under the distant sun. At the center of the formation, the Emperor's flagship Inevitable dwarfed all others, a city-sized vessel bristling with weapons that could crack planets. On its command bridge, Grand Marshal Choi surveyed the holographic display of the solar system with cold calculation. He had conquered 17 star systems during his century-long career, facing everything from highly advanced civilizations to desperate guerrilla fighters. Never once had he failed the Empire. All battle groups report ready, Marshal, said his second-in-command. Choi nodded, his decorated uniform glinting under the bridge lights. Send the message. Standard Imperial ultimatum. Marshal, the sensor, officer called suddenly. We're detecting a single vessel approaching from the inner system. Show me. The main screen shifted to display a sleek Earth ship, barely a kilometer long. It moved with impossible grace, leaving no energy signature that Imperial sensors could detect. That can't be their only defense vessel, Choi said, eyes narrowing. Scan the system. Nothing, sir. No fleet, no defensive platforms. Just that single ship. The Marshal's expression darkened. Either the humans were fools or they were hiding something enormous. His experience suggested the latter. They're hailing us, the communications officer announced. On screen, the image of Admiral Song appeared, a middle-aged woman with calm, eyes that showed no trace of fear despite facing the largest fleet assembled in Imperial history. This is Admiral Song of Earth Defense. You have entered Earth-controlled space against explicit warnings. This is your final notice. Earth is off limits. Withdraw immediately. Marshal Choi almost laughed. Admiral, I command 30,000 warships. Your entire civilization numbers less than 10 billion souls. There will be no withdrawal. The Emperor himself accompanies this fleet to witness your surrender. Admiral Song's expression didn't change. We have no desire for conflict, Marshal. We would prefer peaceful contact, but we will not surrender our sovereignty. Your preferences are irrelevant, Choi replied coldly. You've been given the honor of an Imperial ultimatum. Surrender your system and submit to Imperial authority or face extinction. You have 1 hour to consider. We don't need an hour, Song said quietly. Earth is off limits. This is not a negotiation. Choi gestured to cut the transmission. Prepare a demonstration. Target their outermost planetary body. The weapons officer looked up in surprise. Sir, a planetary bombardment without formal declaration? These primitives need to understand what they're facing, Choi said dismissively. Target their ice dwarf planet. Limited strike. Throughout the massive fleet, planet-killer weapons charged. Energies that could shatter worlds gathered at focal points, aimed at distant Pluto. Fire, Choi ordered. Beams of concentrated destruction lanced across the solar system. Where they converged, Pluto's surface erupted in massive explosions, chunks of the small planet breaking apart and drifting into space. Message sent, Choi said with satisfaction. Now we wait for their energy. Spike! The sensor officer shouted suddenly. Massive readings throughout the system. The marshal spun around. Location? Everywhere, sir. It's as if the space dust itself is activating. Throughout the solar system, particles too small to detect individually began to glow with soft blue light. The phenomenon spread like ripples in a pond, waves of energy connecting one point to another in an expanding web. What is this? Choi demanded as the web approached his fleet. Before anyone could answer, the energy reached the first line of Imperial ships. They simply stopped. Engines died. Weapons went offline. Communications fell silent. Report, Choi barked as the effect raced toward the center of the formation. Ships are going dark, sir. All systems failing. It's some kind of quantum field effect. The marshal had just enough time to issue emergency protocols before the energy wave washed over the flagship. Bridge lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency lighting. The mighty inevitable drifted powerless in space, along with 30,000 other vessels of the once unstoppable Imperial Armada. In the sudden silence, only the life support systems continued to hum. Status, Choi said quietly. All weapons, offline. Engines offline. Faster than light drive offline. His second reported, voice steady despite the situation. Emergency power only. The rest of the fleet? Same condition as far as we can tell. Short-range communications still function, but nothing more. The marshal stood very still, mind racing through possibilities. In all his years of warfare, he had never encountered anything like this. An entire fleet neutralized without a single shot fired. The communications panel chimed softly. It's the Earth vessel, sir, the officer said. They're requesting permission to dock. Choi's jaw tightened. Granted. Admiral Song walked onto the bridge of the Imperial flagship accompanied by only 2 guards. The Imperial officers stiffened at her approach, some reaching for weapons that no longer functioned. Marshal Choi. She greeted him with a respectful nod. I'm here to escort you and the Emperor to Earth for proper diplomatic discussions. You dare dictate terms to the Empire? Choi's voice was dangerously quiet. Song's expression remained neutral. Your fleet has been immobilized, Marshal, not destroyed. That was a deliberate choice on our part. We could have eliminated every ship the moment you arrived. Impossible, one of the Imperial scientists blurted. No weapon system could target 30,000 ships simultaneously. We don't use weapons as you understand them, Song replied. What you're experiencing isn't an attack, it's a field effect. The quantum entanglement dust has been spread throughout our solar system for centuries, invisible until activated. It creates a dampening field that selectively disables technology operating on certain principles. Choi studied her with new intensity. And your ships are immune? Our technology developed along different paths, she said simply. Where your civilization pursued energy manipulation and brute force. We explored quantum harmonics and neural interfaces. We don't overpower natural laws. We work within them. The door to the Emperor's private chamber opened. Emperor Gil stepped onto the bridge, his guards hovering nervously behind him. You've made your point, Admiral, the Emperor said, his voice tight with controlled fury. What are your terms? Simple. Acknowledgement of Earth's sovereignty over this solar system. Non-aggression pact. Open diplomatic relations. She paused. And the beginning of cultural and scientific exchange if you're interested. Exchange? The Emperor's laugh was bitter. You've brought the Imperial Armada to its knees, and you speak of exchange? Admiral Song's expression softened slightly. Your civilization has existed for 10,000 years, spreading across countless stars. We have much to learn from you, and perhaps there are things we could teach you as well. The Emperor and the Marshal exchanged glances. Both recognized the unspoken truth. They had no choice. For the first time in living memory, the Empire had been defeated. Not through violence or superior firepower, but through technology so advanced, it seemed like magic. "I will go to Earth," the Emperor said finally, "to discuss these terms." As the small Earth vessel prepared to escort the Imperial leaders back to the Blue Planet, Marshal Choi stared out at his helpless fleet. 30,000 ships, millions of Imperial citizens, all at the mercy of a civilization that, until recently, the Empire had considered primitive. "How did we miss this?" he whispered to himself. "How did we not see?" Admiral Song overheard him. "You were looking for the wrong signs," she said quietly. "You measure advancement by conquest and expansion. We chose to advance by understanding instead." As they departed the powerless flagship, the stars seemed dimmer to the Marshal's eyes, as if the certainties that had guided his life were fading alongside the Empire's unquestioned dominance of the galaxy. The Earthship descended through morning, clouds, sunlight catching on its hull as it approached the sprawling complex of the United Earth capital in New Geneva. Below, the city gleamed, not with towering spires or imposing monuments, but with living architecture, where buildings and nature blended seamlessly together. Gardens climbed walls, trees grew through graceful structures, and waterways flowed through the heart of the metropolis. Emperor Gil watched through the viewport, his face carefully composed to hide his surprise. He had expected primitive concrete monstrosities or crude attempts to copy imperial grandeur. Instead, he saw something entirely different, a city that seemed to breathe with the landscape rather than dominate it. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Admiral," Song said, noting his reaction. "We rebuilt after the Great Collapse with a different philosophy." The Emperor didn't respond. Beside him, Grand Marshal Choi studied the city with a military leader's eye, looking for defenses or weapon emplacements. He found none visible, which unsettled him more than if he'd seen obvious fortifications. The ship landed on a simple platform surrounded by cherry trees in full bloom, their petals drifting in the spring breeze. As the delegation stepped out, they were met not by an honor guard or military formation, but by a small group led by a gray-haired man with laugh lines around his eyes. "Welcome to Earth," President Yoon said, extending his hand in the traditional Earth greeting. "I am President Yoon of the United Earth Nations." The Emperor stared at the offered hand momentarily, before clasping it briefly. "Emperor Gil of the Galactic Empire, ruler of the 6 quadrants, conqueror of 1,000 worlds." The title sounded hollow even to his own ears in this strange place. "We have prepared a meeting space," the president said, gesturing toward a circular building nestled amongst towering trees. "Please, join us." As they walked, the imperial delegation couldn't help but notice the absence of the poverty, pollution, and overcrowding that plagued most developing worlds. Citizens moved about their day, glancing curiously at the visitors but showing no fear. Children played in parks. Nowhere did they see the desperate scramble for resources that characterized most young civilizations. Inside the meeting chamber, leaders from Earth's various regions had gathered. The room was designed as a perfect circle with a living tree, growing through its center, reaching toward a transparent dome that showed the sky above. Once seated, Emperor Gil wasted no time. "You have committed an act of war against the Empire by disabling our fleet. I am here to discuss terms of resolution that will prevent further escalation." President Yoon's expression remained calm. "We defended our sovereign territory after repeated warnings and a direct attack. Your fleet remains intact and your people unharmed, a courtesy you have not extended to other civilizations who refused imperial expansion." The Emperor's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" "A better question," countered Dr. Lee, who sat to the president's right, "is what do we all want? Peace, prosperity, knowledge, advancement?" "The Empire brings order to chaos," Marshal Choi said, stiffly. "We unite planets under common law and protection. Through force," Commander Han noted. "We've studied your history. 93% of imperial worlds were incorporated through military conquest or economic coercion. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. And you believe you found a better way? Not better, President Yoon said carefully. Different. When humanity nearly destroyed itself 3 centuries ago, we faced a choice: continue our path of consumption and expansion, or find another way to advance. He gestured, and the dome above them transformed into a display showing Earth's history, the devastating wars, environmental collapse, and the moment of change when humanity turned away from self-destruction. We chose to develop inward rather than outward, Dr. Lee explained. Rather than conquering space, we explored consciousness. Instead of bending natural laws to our will, we learned to work within them more effectively. The Emperor looked unconvinced. Pretty words, but advancement requires resources, territory, power. Does it? President Yoon asked simply. Look around you. Earth supports 10 billion humans in harmony with our environment. We produce no waste. We consume only renewable resources. Our technology advances without destroying what sustains us. Director HFY Kim activated another display, showing the quantum network that had disabled the Imperial fleet. Your ships use brute force, enormous energy expenditures controlled by relatively simple systems. Our technology uses minimal energy, but with infinitely more complex organization. For the first time, the Emperor looked genuinely curious rather than hostile. And this is what allowed you to disable our fleet? This quantum network? Dr. Lee nodded. Your ships exist in quantum superposition like all matter. We simply nudged the probability wave to favor states where your technology couldn't function. No destruction necessary. The Imperial Science Advisor, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward with wide eyes. That's theoretically impossible. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical using your methods, Dr. Lee finished for him. Using ours, it requires less power than lighting this room. A heavy silence fell as the implications sank in. The Empire had not just encountered a more advanced civilization. They had found one advancing in an entirely different direction, making their own vast technological achievements suddenly obsolete. What happens now? The Emperor finally asked, the weight of his position visible in his shoulders. President Yoon's expression softened. Now, we talk. We learn from each other. The Empire has achieved remarkable things. Stable governance across vast distances, preservation of countless cultural artifacts, engineering marvels. We would learn from your successes. And in return? Marshal Choi asked skeptically. We share our approach, our understanding of quantum systems, neural interfaces, harmony-based technologies. The president smiled slightly. And perhaps most importantly, a different vision of what advancement can look like. The Emperor studied the humans carefully. You could destroy our fleet, force terms upon us. Why negotiate at all? Because that's not who we chose to become, Commander Han said simply. Conquest, even in self-defense, is still conquest. As the discussions continued into the day, Emperor Gil found himself increasingly disturbed not by the humans' technology, but by their philosophy. Throughout his reign, he had never questioned the Empire's right to expand, to claim, to rule. Power justified itself. Strength created its own morality. Yet here was a civilization that had become more advanced by turning away from those very principles, by rejecting the path that the Empire and countless other galactic powers had followed for millennia. When far evening fell, agreements had been reached. Earth would remain sovereign. The Imperial fleet would be released once diplomatic relations were formally established. Cultural and scientific exchanges would begin cautiously, with representatives from both civilizations working together. As the Emperor prepared to return to his ship, he paused beside a small pond in the meeting complex's garden. His reflection wavered in the rippling water. Your people didn't develop weapons, he said to President Yoon, who had escorted him outside, despite having the knowledge to create devastating ones. Why? We had weapons once, Yoon replied quietly. They nearly ended us. We learned that controlling nature through force always creates unintended consequences. When you fight against life systems rather than working within them, you ultimately fight against yourself. The Emperor nodded slowly. Your civilization will change the galaxy, he said, not entirely pleased with the idea. Others will hear of this. Worlds we've conquered, species we've subjugated, they'll look to Earth as an example. Perhaps, the President acknowledged. Or perhaps the Empire itself might change. You've ruled through force because that seemed the only path. Now you've seen another way as possible. That night, as the small Earth vessel carried him back to his flagship, Emperor Gil looked down at the blue planet growing smaller beneath him. For 10,000 years, the Empire had expanded across the stars, bringing countless worlds under its control through superior firepower and technology. Now they had encountered a civilization that had transcended the need for either, not through weakness, but through a different kind of strength. A civilization that had chosen harmony over domination, understanding over conquest. As his fleet prepared to depart, systems gradually restored by the retreating quantum field, the Emperor wondered if this encounter marked not just a setback for Imperial expansion, but the beginning of a transformation far more profound than any military defeat. Behind him, Earth continued its quiet orbit around its sun, a small blue world that had just changed the course of galactic history with 4 simple words: Earth is off limits.